Welcome into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time for the Week 14 waiver wire. Last week of many people's regular season. Some people have been kicked out of the playoffs already, unfortunately. But for those who have not, first of all, this was a lot of injuries, unfortunately. Some big names, several replacement options are going to be on the board, not all of which will hit. There are some that you can speculate on. We don't know for sure, if the players will be coming back or not from their injuries in time for the games this upcoming weekend already. So there's a lot to go over. First, we will start up by following up on injuries from weeks past, go over the injuries from this past weekend. And Monday Night Football has not occurred yet. So if anything big happens on Monday night, I am going to record a last little segment and then put that at the end of the video in the for the timestamps, whatever you want to call them, bookmarks. There would be one last bookmark at the end of this. I don't know what, I'll just call it, this is that bookmark. So just to let you know if you wanted to jump to see that stuff too towards the end as I'm wrapping the video up. There you go. I will have that specially bookmarked. As far as Week 14 goes, there are a couple of buys to be aware of. The Cardinals and the Commanders will be on bye, so keep that in mind. And it's time for the injury follow-up before we get into the waiver wire. So, some guys still a few weeks away here are going to be Michael Thomas, Luke Musgrave, both able to come off of IR as of Week 16. Then Jonathan Taylor is going to be out due to a thumb surgery, I believe, right? 2 to 4 weeks is the ETA that we have received on him. Rashid Shaheed with his thigh injury, Michael Wilson, Deonta Foreman, all guys who could be coming back this week. Could take them some more time. Then Darren Waller, Demario Douglas, DTR, Aaron Jones, Kenneth Walker, Dawson Knox, Josh Palmer, all guys who could return this week. And last up, Justin Jefferson and Dallas Goedert are both expected. That is the expectation at this point in time for Dallas Goedert, just based on how close it appeared that he was coming to last week. I would imagine he'll probably be returning. And Justin Jefferson, the plan has been that he would be returning after their bye week, so we are there. Now, let's look at the new injuries here, and unfortunately, going to start off with Tank Dell. RIP to his season, broken fibula. That is a leg bone. So, unfortunately, out for the season. No bueno. Then Kenny Pickett had an ankle injury, had some surgery. Going to be 2 to 4 weeks is the ETA on him. Christian Watson and Brian Robinson both had hamstring injuries. Now, the average time that I always find is like 19 days for hamstrings. We know a lot of times hamstring injuries, guys go on IR with that. We know how fickle they can be, how long the recovery time can be. There are a lot of little hamstring tweaks that I guess must really lower that number. So obviously be aware that this time frame, it could be much longer. It can be bad. And as far as Christian Watson goes, this has been a chronic issue for him throughout his entire career. Could be a reach week of his hamstring injury from earlier on in the season that he was just really coming back from. So not a good situation there. We'll just have to wait and see for more information on those two, but I would not expect them to be coming back this week. Then Ramondre Stevenson had an ankle injury. I have not seen this reported, but I just heard it from listening to Fantasy Footballers podcast that they referred to it as a high ankle sprain. So this 1 to 3 week time frame for an ankle injury. High ankle sprain, going to be on the higher end of that. Maybe he's even a candidate for the IR. Haven't heard that yet, but with a high ankle sprain, that would be possible. Then Derek Carr got absolutely crumpled up on a play. At the time, it was like head injury, back injury, shoulder injury. Apparently the shoulder's fine, and apparently the back was a rib injury, and he did have a concussion. He's in concussion protocol, and on average, guys miss 1 week from concussion protocol, once they've entered concussion protocol. But as we saw last week, Chris Olave, sometimes guys can come back. I think a couple weeks ago, Christian Watson was ruled back by Tuesday or something like that. So you never know for sure, but that's the most likely scenarios that these guys will be missing a week. Derrick Henry's going to get an extra day, but I haven't seen it yet. I got to look it up. Apparently, it's a pretty gnarly hit that took him out, and he actually went flying on the play, and then maybe in midair is when he gets his head hit. So that sounds like a rough one for Derrick Henry. We'll keep an eye on that as much as we can. Zach Charbonnet had a knee bruise. could be coming back this week. Really just depends on how deep that bruise is. And the higher end of the expectation would be about 2 weeks. And then DeAndre Swift had an injury right towards the end of the game. I've heard varying things about it not looking like it's too bad. I believe if it was bad, we would have heard about it by now. So probably nothing, but I don't want to pretend like it's absolutely nothing at this point in time. So we'll keep that on the radar. That's going to affect a couple things for the waiver wire. Now let's get on to the waiver wire options for Week 14. And we're going to start off with the quarterback position for the waiver wires. Over here, strength of schedule. This is taken from Fantasy Pros website. Out of 5, higher numbers good. And this is the playoff strength of schedule. So then, not including next week. But of course, we have those matchups up here. And I have also gone through and highlighted the good and the bad matchups. Green being good, of course. Red being the poor matchups. Josh Dobbs, I think, is going to be your strongest and best option off of the waiver wire. Ended on a sour note the last game that we saw him. I do think that the team is probably going to stick with him. I don't know that that's an absolute guarantee. Not, if you need help at quarterback, this is the route I would go. But Gardner Minshew would also be maybe a slightly safer route. However, looking forward, Josh Dobbs' schedule is just a little bit cleaner than Gardner Minshew's, and he offers what he can do on the ground is nice for you. Matt Stafford, also a strong playoff schedule for him. Just a tough matchup this upcoming week against Baltimore that we're not going to get too excited about. But right after that, Washington. So it just depends what you're looking for. If you're already looking ahead to the playoffs, Matt Stafford might be your guy, especially for week 1 of the playoffs. And then Jameis Winston's going to make the list here. Derrick Henry, not a guarantee to be out, but probably will be missing 1 week at least. And it's not really a great week for him going up against Carolina. But Jameis Winston, first of all, the Carolina passing defense doesn't necessarily scare you. It's just that teams can usually run against them quite well. But of course, we know how Jameis Winston likes to play football. He likes to attack deep. And so I would still take a shot at him at some point in deeper leagues, at least at the quarterback position. Or if your team hogs up all the quarterbacks. Let's move on to the running back waivers. And here, as you can see, we have a lot of guys on the waiver wire for the running back position. Going to start off with Tyjae Spears. I think he is the clear-cut number 1 option if you are looking for a way into the playoffs. Your ticket to the playoffs could be Tyjae Spears going up against Miami. Not the most amazing matchup. However, for Tyjae Spears specifically, since he is the receptions kind of guy, this actually is, I think, a pretty decent matchup for him, especially when you consider that he'll also get onto the field more and get some rushing attempts, just get more touches. So he's going to be your stud option this week. I'd imagine he'll be ranked quite highly. But if you're looking for something a little bit more long-term, that Ramondre Stevenson injury should be a multi-week thing. And so Ezekiel Elliott's going to be your option. Now, it's tough for me to love the upside of Ezekiel Elliott. You do see a good, strong strength of schedule for the playoffs. That's great. Although I will say Denver's, it can be a little bit misleading as to how great of a matchup that they are, just due to some of the early season woes compared to how they've been playing as of late. I don't see the upside in that offense with him and his age, not really explosive. So he's a great guy to get in your lineup if you're in an emergency situation here, especially for the long term, if you lost some of those other players or are just desperate at running back. But I'd much rather, in a 1 week thing, playing week by week here, take Tyjae Spears. Then Roschon Johnson's also going to be up here. Saw the most usage that he's seen all season in his last matchup. We might be seeing Deonta Foreman return. That is a 1 week sample size. I'm not 100% sold on this. I think I would have a tough time playing him next week up against Detroit. I think at Cleveland after that. They've been more susceptible to the run as of late than Arizona. That's nice. Hopefully you could trust him by then. So to me, a little bit more of a stash than necessarily a guy who I'm going to be confident playing next week. But you could also do worse, I'm sure, or grab him and then maybe end up starting somebody else in a pinch. Might not be the worst thing to do as well, if depending on what the news looks like throughout the week. Kenneth Gainwell here, he's up here because of the concerns for DeAndre Swift. If DeAndre Swift is out, and especially if he's out for some time, going to have a couple of good matchups coming up. Dallas this upcoming week, not great, but can be had on the ground, somewhat. And then Keaton Mitchell is, of course, your lightning rod here. Still not over 50% owned. All of the cutoff line for me is 50% on ESPN's website for ownership. And he is like 30-something% owned. He is a lightning rod. He's going to offer you a high ceiling and a low floor. Not going to get too many touches. There is still a chance that they might give him more and more work. We did see him get more work, an acceptable amount of work in his last outing, so that is exciting. And should be on, should be 80% rostered. Like, he should be rostered. Then with the injury to Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, Chris Rodriguez Jr. enter the chat. The thing about Chris Rodriguez and why he might end up being the better option between the two is that he can block. He used to be, I think, an offensive lineman when he was really young, went to a fullback, then he got moved to a running back, something like that. And as far as I'm aware, he is a good blocker. So maybe they will trust Chris Rodriguez and keep Antonio Gibson somewhat in the same role that he's been all season long. That's very possible. But what I will say here is you can see the strength of schedule, not great for running backs. Not necessarily games where they'll be highly favored throughout the entirety of the playoffs. And so Antonio Gibson could be your better call. You're getting ahead of, they have a bye week this week, so you're getting ahead of things by taking one of these two. But that could also save you next week from getting into a scramble for one of them. And I think it's Antonio Gibson by a hair here between these two, but they should probably both be rostered on the ends of rosters in most leagues. Then we have DJ Dallas, Kenny McIntosh, in the event that both Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker are out this week, which is a possibility, not likely. Both of them could be coming back as well. Then these two will have value. And so if you're in a deeper league, you're desperate for running back, or you put in some offers, maybe also throw in an offer on one of these guys or both of them, and just in case. But the downside here is the matchup, not a pretty matchup, which makes me think DJ Dallas, much like Antonio Gibson, is going to be the better option because they're probably going to be playing from behind in these games. So even if Kenny McIntosh were to get the start, which I think is less likely than it is for Chris Rodriguez, then I still think DJ Dallas ends up with more touches and better value touches because both of these teams are really good against the run. So, Kenny McIntosh, like a deep stash / emergency play option in deeper leagues type of player, but I needed to bring him up. Then for my stashes, Elijah Mitchell, Ty Chandler, Rico Dowdle, still top end stashes. Dearness Johnson, we had a scare this week with Travis Etienne. And we saw how valuable he could be in that situation. He has been getting used more as well as of late, so it might be kind of a free agent emergency pinch. Samaje Perine-like kind of player for the rest of the season as well. And Jeff Wilson Jr. in the event of an injury, or especially two ahead of him, would be great. But any part of that offense would be great, but we did see that the team is going to trust the other two running backs. They're not going to be rolling out three. So that's good news for the other two running backs. And, of course, in the free agents, if you need somebody in a pinch, Tyler Algier, if he's out there, you could always play him and hope for the best. And Samaje Perine. Royce Freeman, I feel like I wanted to delete him like 10 times. I guess I didn't. Let's move on to the wide receiver waiver wire options. And at the top of this list, I'm going to have Jaden Reed. It wasn't a great week last week. And Romeo Doubs right behind him. But very good matchups here in the coming weeks, and expecting Christian Watson to probably miss some time. So I'm a big fan of these two with how that offense has been going, getting these two better matchups in the coming weeks. I think they are my top two options that I think that you should be going for. And I just think that Jaden Reed's slightly more trustworthy than Romeo Doubs, but Romeo Doubs might have a little bit higher upside. I think he's got a couple more touchdowns on the season. Then we got Noah Brown hanging out right below them. He's your swing for the fences guy. Unfortunately, going to have a couple of tough matchups coming up for him, and the New York Jets, and then Cleveland down the road, not too far off. And Tennessee, they have a good matchup in a couple of weeks. So, once again, very, very good option. Should be rostered after this week with the injury to Tank Dell. We just saw not too long back how explosive he can be. Demario Douglas, don't have bolded here. Don't know for sure that he's going to be returning this week, going up against Pittsburgh, KC, Denver. Good strength of schedule for the playoffs, but once again, it's the New England offense. I guess we hope that Mac Jones returns for him, if you want to go that route. And then Josh Palmer is going to be the top end free agent stash here. Don't know that he'll be returning this week either. Got Denver, not the best of matchups coming up. Then Las Vegas, Buffalo, you see a strong schedule for the playoffs for him. And this team desperately needs him. So whenever he does return, I'm going to be pretty excited about him. I don't think too many people are going to be clamoring to get him. Word has been pretty silent on his injury status, so there hasn't been a whole lot of buzz around him. But I do see him on some waiver wire lists, so don't be afraid to put a little bit of a bet on him. But if he's still out there after the waiver wire, definitely a guy to stash on the back end of your bench. I think Curtis Samuel, OBJ, Elijah Moore, Jonathan Mingo, Rashid Shaheed, all my kind of top free agent stash kind of guys to have on the back end of your roster. Let's move on to the tight ends. Oh my gosh, look at this. Real quick for the tight ends. It's Isaiah Likely is the only tight end that I think is stands out in the least bit. I'm not super confident in it. Does have a good matchup this week against the Rams at least. Fine strength of schedule for the playoffs. But otherwise, just look at the rankings and choose the best one in the rankings when it comes time. If you need a tight end this week, he's the only one worth maybe just grabbing ahead of time. Especially with that good matchup. Now, let's go on to my DST streamers this week. This cut might be shocking because I had not prepared these yet, but I just went ahead and prepared them. So, for my DST streamers this week, it's a pretty good streaming week. We're going to have the Houston Texans as my top option here going up against the New York Jets. Seems like a pretty solid matchup to go. Houston Texans also been the best, second best DST, I think, out of this group. Indianapolis has been the best DST out of this group. Of course, Cincinnati, as far as an opponent, average fantasy points scored against them is a little bit, in flux right now. We'll see what happens in the Monday night game, too. That could push this game up ahead of the Green Bay Packers versus the New York Giants. But also looking at the betting lines so far, for these games, expected point totals, that helps to keep Houston and Green Bay, I think, as your clear-cut number 2 options. Then we'll take the best defense in what should be a solid matchup here against Cincinnati, followed by the Minnesota Vikings and Detroit Lions going up against Las Vegas and Chicago. I just think Chicago has the potential to put up quite a few points, of course, against the Lions. So I don't love that matchup, but Chicago is one of the, I'd say, out of this group, I think they were the third best in terms of matchups for DSTs. So that is to be taken into consideration, was taken into consideration, and does keep them as an option for you this week, the Detroit Lions, that is. So there you go. Those are the DST streamers. That is the waiver wire video. We'll see if there's a little more clip at the end, but if not, please don't forget, I go live every Thursday and Sunday prior to the game, hour and a half, 2 hours prior on Thursdays, and 3 hours prior Sunday mornings. For any of your start-sit questions, rankings can be found up on the website as they go. Of course, videos will also come out with rankings for each position throughout the week. And let's kill it. Let's get into the playoffs. Let's prepare for the playoffs. And if you have any questions, of course, drop them down in the comments, and I will get to them as I can. Peace out. And I'm back. What a Monday night football game that was. So there are, unfortunately, some updates from the game. Might have a slight lisp. Got my retainer in for my Invisalign. So, Trevor Lawrence had an injury. You're probably aware of that by now. Ankle, leg. Didn't look good. Have no clue what it really actually is at this point in time. Could get good news today, tomorrow. So we'll just see on that, but that's not good. Christian Kirk, early in the game, like first play of the game or his first catch, had a groin injury. On average, that's going to be a 0 to 5 week injury. So could be back soon, might not be, but probably won't have Trevor Lawrence if he's back soon. So that's no bueno. Then looking at the quarterbacks, Jake Browning won me over tonight. Very good game. I was already thinking about, needed to see this game. So Indianapolis, Minnesota coming up in the short term here. Strength of schedule for the playoffs, not too great. Pittsburgh in a few weeks, but in the short term, solid option if you need help there at the quarterback spot. And my boy Chase Brown at running back showed his stuff finally this week, so that was awesome to see. They got him 9 touches. Not enough to get overly excited, but I do think that he's a strong stash, as this team will probably be relying on the run too going forward a fair bit. And nothing for the wide receivers. We would have been moving Zay Jones up a little ways here, but with the injury to Trevor Lawrence, not as excited about that anymore. In fact, you'd probably move him down. Also wanted to make a change here with how well Jake Browning played tonight, and how well he's played in general, to the rankings from my DST streamers. So I did flip Minnesota and Indianapolis there due to that. So there we go. There is the update. Peace out. I'm going to get this out now. Bye-bye.